Daily Broadside, day 936. I think one of the things that they failed to tell you about owning a dog is all the weird stuff that dogs can't eat. You know, like dogs can't have like grapes and chocolate and walnuts and avocados. It's like this weird list of just random foods that don't make any sense of why a dog can't process that in their system without it being like lethal to them or making them sick or whatever. And nobody tells you this stuff. I was feeding my dog grapes probably like 9 months ago, and she'd had like two or three, and somebody came in the room and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, we're just enjoying some grapes, seedless. You want one?" And they're like, "Are you giving those to the dog?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why? Dogs aren't supposed to eat grapes." I think it was grapes, pretty sure. And I was like, "What?" I was like, nobody told me that. They should come with a list when you get the dog. It should be like a law that you can't, kind of like you can't sell a mattress without a mattress tag, or you got to have a car has to have a VIN plate and whatever. I mean, there's like certain things that just have to have certain things, right, to make them legitimate and all. And but nobody tells you this stuff. And why would you think like it's an animal? Like there's nothing that I can't eat. Like as a human, I may be speaking out of turn, but as long as it's not poisonous, I can eat any food that is a food. And why can't another animal? I bet bears don't have it. I bet you can't be like, "Oh, you're not supposed to feed bears grapes. Grape. You can't feed chocolate to a bear." A bear, I'm sure bears eat tons of chocolate throughout this country yearly. Get in a mountain cabin and find some old Almond Joys on a shelf or whatever and just gnaw through the packaging to get to it. Bear doesn't care. But apparently dogs got some weird little tricky system. And I don't know if that's because we've domesticated them and made them into just complete like wusses with their system or whatnot. But somebody needs to tell people that stuff. You shouldn't just have to know this stuff. Because if I were to get a dog, why would I think, "Oh, this is great. I got a new dog. This is my first dog. I'm so happy to have this dog. It's such a good dog." And all this is like, whoops. But before I go home, I better Google what I can and can't feed it, I mean, maybe you do that with fish, obviously, but no, you don't. I mean, I imagine anything that lives in the ocean a fish can eat. Is there anything like, if you have it's not a piranha, but they're called like eddies or travises, or there's some kind of fish that like attacks other fish. What's it called? I can't remember, but it seems like it's got like a human name. Anyway, like I would think that anything that's like, if I just cut off a chunk of a dolphin and put it in that tank, that thing would just eat it, right? I mean, a goldfish. I don't know if goldfish are vegetarian because I don't know what those food flakes, is that meat, like ground up like donkey? I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's a ground up plant. I don't know what goldfish. I don't know if they're pescatarians or vegetarians or carniceritarian. I don't know what they are, but I've never, I wouldn't think that I could own a fish and be like, I better find out what this thing can't eat so it doesn't get sick. But dogs, and you would think too, like dogs, they roam free. It's why we have junkyard dog type of, mutts that just roam the earth. There's tons of dogs out there right now, just without ownership, just floating around the universe, just rifling through trash and whatnot. You telling me that the dog's not going to eat the chocolate or the grapes that they find in the trash? I mean, doesn't negate the fact that it might make them sick. But the point is, you would think that they would just be able to consume whatever's out there that's, edible food. Nevertheless, I now know a list. I've got the main basic gist of it. I looked it up the other week. I just don't remember it. I probably need to write that down somewhere if I can't remember it. It's probably important. I'm surprised that more people don't like have homesteads with their buddies. Like I was telling my friend the other day, actually I lied, a few weeks ago. I was like, why don't we all like there's like, I got like 5 or 6 friends that I would be totally cool buying like 100 acres with, and each building like a little house, right? And we all just kind of have this like commune, and we got this, property that kind of, you enter one road and then it juts off the different driveways and all, but you can't see each other, but you're, within a quarter of an acre quarter of an acre, that's not very big. You're an acre or two apart, and that way you have your own, privacy, but you're in like a little community. So why does that not happen more often? You would think that would happen. Not only because, you could borrow stuff, you wouldn't have to buy, seven tractors, you could have one tractor, and we could all just share in the cost of the implements or whatever. If you needed a couple eggs or a cup of sugar, you're right there. But also because there'd be safety there. You'd always have people looking out for your stuff and all that kind of stuff. I'm surprised that doesn't happen more often. And I guess it does with families. I know people that live on family land and their parents are at the back of the property and their grandparents are over there and all that. But it doesn't really happen with friends that often. That said, not far from where I live, there is a house that sits off the road, and it was probably built in the 80s, and it's one of these majestic houses, 3 stories, huge columns, massive house. I mean, it's probably 5,500 square foot house, and it's got this big circle driveway and this like promenade, driveway that goes up to it and all this stuff. And I was on Google Earth one day and I was looking for something, and I saw that house and I zoomed in. I'm like, oh, that house is bigger than I thought. You can tell it's a big house, but then when you see the back of the property, it extends a little further than you thought. But then there's 2 houses like at the back. Like if you're going down the driveway and the house is right there at 12 o'clock, you got a house over at like 10 o'clock and you got one at 2:30. And they're a little more, newer houses and all, but still very big, probably 3,800 square foot, 4,000, 4,200, something like that. And I was like, and they all go off of this main driveway. And I was like, oh, this has got to be some kind of family land, right? And so I was talking to my buddy a couple months later, and and we drove by there. And I said, what's the story with that house? Because he grew up there in that area. And I said, what's the story with this house? Why do they have those other 2 newer houses next to this one? He's like, oh, that's the parents, and they own such and such and such. And that's the 2 daughters that live in those houses with their husbands and kids and all that stuff. And I was like, oh, that's cool. But then I thought to myself, what happens when the parents die? Because now you've got this massive 6,000 square foot house that you don't want somebody to just buy, and now you share a driveway with strangers, and you don't necessarily want to move in, out of your house into the bigger house because which daughter gets it, and why would you want to move all that stuff into a house that, although bigger, is more dated? You got to update the kitchen and all that kind of stuff, and the bathrooms and all that kind of crap. It's just kind of odd. I don't know where that goes. I don't know how. And you can't be like, well, the parents have died, we got to move out, sis. We got to go find our own place. We can't live here and have weirdos live. Because how are you going to sell 3 houses attached to the same driveway? It's just a very strange thing. And yet, I guess people don't think about it like that. But those are things you got to consider. If you're setting up a homestead with your family or with your friends, you got to make it to where when you all die, you start dying off, that you can get rid of the property and not be bothered if you get bad neighbors after that. You know what I mean? But anyway, y'all have a good Monday afternoon. I get it.